Now that you have learned the Hebrew alphabet, it's important that we add in the Hebrew vowels. By way of introduction, Hebrew vowels were added over a long period of time. Initially, Hebrew was written without any vowels at all, and in order to clarify meaning, certain vowel markers and vowel notations were eventually added to make sure that the text was read properly. That process begins when you look at the ambiguity that exists with certain Hebrew words. For example, the letters mem, lamed, and kaf can have several different meanings. Mem, lamed, kaf can mean king. Mem, lamed, kaf can mean queen. And mem, lamed, kaf can mean they ruled. And yet those three letters are not pronounced the same in each of those examples. The vowels are different. And yet Hebrew did not have vowels in their alphabet. So the same consonants could convey different meaning depending on the context in which they appeared. So the word king, Melech, the word queen, Malkah, and they ruled, Malaku. As a first stage in marking the presence of vowels in a written text, certain consonants were added into the text to mark the presence of a vowel. As you can see here from a very rudimentary depiction, the letter he has been added to the end of the word for queen, and a vav has been added to the end of the word for they ruled. What that represents is a vowel sound. So king, melech, but queen, malkah. And if you say the ah sound, you can kind of hear the remnant of an H sound at the end of the vowel, ah. Likewise, when you say the word they ruled, malaku, the oo sound at the end can have the hint of a W sound to it when you say ooh. You remember that when we talked about the alphabet in the last lesson, I stressed the importance of recognizing that the letter Vav, though pronounced as a V, was originally pronounced as a W. And here's an example of why that is important. It becomes a vowel marker because of its historic pronunciation as a W sound, ooh. The vowel markers that they used are depicted in these 5 examples. The vowel ah, the A vowel, is represented with a he. It's going to appear at the end of words in order to indicate that there's an ah sound at the end of a particular word. The yod is used with 2 sounds. It's used with the E vowel and the I vowel. These are pronounced with more of a European than American pronunciation, and so you can hear it in words like they. The EY, both visually in the English word and in the sound, a, you can hear the yod, the Y sound that shows up in that pronunciation. And the same with a word like ski, the E sound. You can hear at the end of E a Y-type sound, a hint of a Y, that indicates why yod was used as a vowel marker for these 2 vowel sounds. The same thing then is true with the O and the U, both of which are represented with Vav. Again, Vav had the historic W sound, so when we say O or oo, you can hear the W sound that was at the end of that vowel that led them to use Vav as a vowel marker in text. These vowel markers were then inserted into the text both inside the word and, more commonly, at the end of words to indicate the presence of a vowel. And this can be seen in the reading from Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 that's depicted here. You'll notice that in the first word, bereshit, the E sound at the end of that word is represented by a yod in the text. It does not serve any consonantal function. It is there only to indicate the presence of a vowel. The second word is the same way. It is the word Elohim, or God. Again, at the end, Elohim, E, the yod at the end of this word indicates the presence of an I. At the end of that first line, there are two other words, Hayata and Tohu. In the first of those words, Hayata, you can hear the ah sound at the end, and the hey indicates the presence of an ah vowel. Tohu, the vav, the W sound, helps indicate the presence of an u. In the second line, you can see this example again with the similar word vavohu, where the u at the end is marked with a vowel. There are then several words in the middle of this sentence where you see these vowel markers as well. Panay, the A sound, so actually a long E, sounds like A to us in English, but panay, long E, you hear the remnant of a Y sound at the end of that vowel. It's thus marked with a yod. Tahom, the O sound, O, is marked with a vav. Veruach, the U, again marked with a vav. Elohim, again marked with a yod to mark the long I. And then again the word panay at the end of that line. This offered a limited help as you read text. It obviously didn't mark every vowel. And eventually, while it was permissible to insert these letters along the way, eventually the text became fixed. You couldn't insert any more symbols. The text became so sacred that no changes were permitted. And this happened roughly around the time of 100 AD, after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. When the temple was destroyed, the temple, which was the unifying facet of Judaism, was gone, and it was Torah. It was the book that became the unifying facet of Judaism. And as a result, this text became fixed. No more changes were allowed. Once the Hebrew text had been frozen in form, the only way to indicate the reading tradition and preserve correct pronunciation for future generations was to put in notations that did not disrupt the consonants themselves. So from about the 3rd or 4th century up until about the 10th century, vowel notations were placed above or below the Hebrew letters in order to indicate the different vowels. There were actually 3 different systems that were developed in different locations. The Babylonian and Palestinian systems, originating in Babylon and in Palestine itself, were written over the top of the letters and noted above each character. The Tiberian system was written primarily below the line and below each letter, and became the most dominant form. This is the form that was adopted and is now the standard form in printed editions of the Hebrew Bible. This is the form that you will be learning. As you can see from this example from Genesis chapter 1 again, there's a difference then between the text when it has no vowels at all and the text when it's presented with vowel notations to guide you in your pronunciation. Every letter that functions as a consonant has to have vowel dots. It indicates the presence of a vowel or the absence of a vowel and helps you along the way. The final letters do not have to have vowel dots because at that point you know that the word is done. So these vowels are placed above and below each consonant in a word, and at this point then you need to know, how do you put them together? Reading Hebrew with vowels is actually quite simple. What you need to do is you're going to basically weave your way through a Hebrew word. You're going to start with the consonant and then drop down below the consonant, since this is where most Hebrew vowels are located. Pick up the vowel and then transition back up so that you can enter into the next Hebrew consonant. The reason we want you to weave like that as you're beginning to learn Hebrew is that if, for example, it happens to be a vowel that is not recorded below the letter, but is actually recorded above, then you will need to find it as you move back up in the transition from one letter to the next. Because as Hebrew is read from right to left, any vowel that is put above the line is going to be put in a position where you are most appropriately to encounter it. So if it comes after the consonant, it will be positioned high, but it will appear after the consonant that it's supposed to be pronounced with. So if you go through the consonant, check for a vowel at the bottom, and then if you don't get one, pick one up as you come back up to move into the next consonant. You'll do just fine as you transition through each word. In this example, you see the letters He, Chet, Lamed, and Lamed together with a vowel under each letter. This illustrates very simply the way in which you would pronounce each syllable. So the He is going to be pronounced, first of all, with the vowel beneath it. And all of these happen to be A vowels, just to keep this simple. So as I move from the He down into the vowel, I would pronounce ha. Then I would move up, and as I transition into the next, I would pronounce the syllable ha. Then I move up, and I transition into the last syllable, and I encounter lamed, another A, and then my final consonant, lal. So when I pronounce this whole word, I would say ha-ha-lal. To use another example, this time with a vowel that is not positioned beneath, you'll see the letters He, Chet, Mem, and Shin. And in this case, you'll find that one of the vowel notations is positioned high right after the Chet. So as we begin, we go through the He, we come down, we encounter Ah, Ha. We transition up. We already have our vowel. We encounter the next consonant, the Chet. We drop down, but there's no vowel here, so we have to keep moving, and as we come up, we encounter the dot on top, which is a long O, so we're going to pronounce the second syllable, ho. We then transition into the next consonant, the mem, and as we move down, we encounter our next vowel, this time a short E, and then we move up and we hit our final consonant, a sheen, an SH sound, that allows this word to be pronounced, or the final syllable to be pronounced, mesh. So put together, we have ha, ho, mesh. And we just weave our way through the word. Be careful, because sometimes they only use one dot where you expect two. So I've given you this particular word with He, Chet, Shin, and Kaf to illustrate that sometimes when the dot on the letter Shin is positioned where the long O would be, they don't bother writing the dot twice side by side. They just let one dot serve for both. So as you move down, you first of all encounter the letter He and the Ah sound, ha. You transition back up, you catch your next consonant, the Chet, and as you come down, you're expecting to find a vowel, but you don't see a vowel, so you come up and oops, we don't have a vowel here either. It looks like we just have a consonant. But it's impossible to put ch and sh together without some kind of sound. That should clue you into the fact that, the dot is actually functioning for both. So I have to pronounce the chet, and then I use the dot for O, ho, and then when I hit the sheen and I pick up the E, I finish the last syllable with shek. Ha, ho, shek. That is how you utilize the vowels. But before you can utilize them, you have to learn them. So, as you can see from the diagram here on this page, there are 10 vowels, roughly equivalent to some of our English pronunciations, but in some cases you're going to have to make sure that you transition to more of a European sound. As we go through the vowels, it will be helpful to classify them as A class, I class, and U class. Now again, we're kind of preparing you for future discussions because I class vowels, both of them, can be interchangeable in words. You'll find the same Hebrew word spelled slightly differently given certain contexts, and the use of short I versus short E makes no difference in meaning. It's just a preference for a particular place in the word. Same thing with U-class vowels. A short O and a short U can, in certain contexts, be interchangeable. And if you're given a little bit of heads up about that for the future, that will help when we get to those later discussions. So A-class vowels, I-class vowels, U-class vowels comprise the vocalization system for Hebrew, and you get the same A, E, I, O, and U that you get in English, both short and long. So if you look at the diagram, you'll notice that first off we have two A-class vowels, a long and a short. They're both going to be pronounced the same. The pronunciations differ in different traditions, but for our purposes, we're going to pronounce them both as in the word ball, ah. The difference would be one of length, ah versus ah, or ah as in ah, depending on place in the mouth. So ball. These sounds are represented by either a straight line under the consonant or by what looks like a straight line and a tail, or a little letter T under each letter. That's your A vowel, pronounced ah. The second set of vowels is the E vowel. The short E is pronounced like we do in English, like in pet. The long E, however, is pronounced as in the word they. That's different than our English pronunciation. That's more of a European type pronunciation. Make sure that you recognize that difference. That will be one of the greatest challenges for you as you're working with vowels, because you're going to want to pronounce a long E as E, and that sound in Hebrew is an I-class vowel. So think of the word they. And you'll notice that, again, the two symbols are sort of related. Short E is represented with 3 dots, 2 at the top, 1 in the center, whereas long E is represented by 2 dots, so that there's kind of a visual relationship between the two sounds. The third row is represented with short I and long I. Short I is a single dot beneath the letter, like in the word pit. The long I, again, has the European pronunciation, not the American pronunciation, and can be best remembered with the word ski. It's going to be an E sound, which to us sounds like an E. It's going to be represented with the same symbol, but this time it's going to have a yod after it to indicate that it is long. Think of the difference between pit, I, versus ski. You hear the y sound at the end of it. With the yod vowel marker, it's going to be long. Without the vowel marker, it's going to be short. The fourth row is comprised of the vowel O. Short O would be pronounced much as in our word hop. Long O would be pronounced as in our word hope. If you say the word hop, the short O, together with the word ball, ball, hop, ah, you'll notice that they sound very much the same. And that explains why long A and short O have exactly the same symbol. The scholars, called Masoretes, who put in the vocalization, the vowel pointing, did not hear a difference between long A and short O. For them, it was the same sound. So in some traditions, the O vowel, whether long or short, comes to be pronounced exactly the same in order to preserve the historical distinction in sound. So instead of pronouncing short O as ah, like in hop, it's actually pronounced O as in hope, so that short O and long O are both going to have the same type of sound and are going to be differentiated only in terms of length. And you're not going to be able to make that kind of a distinction. You're just always going to hear O. So that is probably the greatest challenge for a beginning student working with these vowels. They all have a distinctive form except for short O and long A. And it's going to take a little bit before we can help you distinguish between those two sounds. Pronounce them differently. So the A vowels, the A-class vowels, will be pronounced ah, like in ball. The O vowels will be pronounced O as in hope. And you'll do that across the board to help make that distinction. The last row is the U vowel. And again, this is going to be pronounced the same in both cases. You'll have the oo sound as in rule. Now, there's probably some kind of a distinction. Even the word put, ooh, it has to do with just rapidity. And for simplification, if you just use ooh, you'll do just fine in terms of the pronunciation of all of those vowel sounds. On this chart, what you need to pay attention to is the sound correlation between the symbol and what it sounds like. There are Hebrew names that are listed there, and you'll become more familiar with those from the exercise as you try to identify what the vowels are. But pay close attention to the sounds as your primary attention. When they put in the vowel pointing for Hebrew, it was required that every Hebrew consonant have some kind of vowel notation except for the final consonant. So when you work with a Hebrew word, we find that we need one more set of notations in order to fill out the whole vowel notation system. We've seen short vowels, we've seen long vowels, but we also need to have something to mark the absence of a vowel. So you'll notice in this modified chart where we have added another column, we've included what we call a schwa. A schwa is the absence of a vowel. And the principle you need to remember is that a schwa is a schwa is a schwa. It does not matter what it looks like. A schwa will always have two vertical dots, and those vertical dots always indicate the absence of a vowel. Most of the time, you will only see two dots. But the guttural letters that we talked about in the last lesson are letters that are often difficult to hear if they do not have some kind of vowel sound. How am I going to hear an aleph, which has no sound, if I have no sound with it? So the guttural letters have a tendency to prefer what we call a composite schwa. All we mean by that is that it will take the A-class, I-class, or U-class categories, and it will combine a short vowel, very short vowel, together with the vertical dots that indicate schwa. So in the A class category, you'll notice that to indicate the absence of a vowel, a letter can have either the two dots that are the regular schwa, or it can have a patach, a short A, together with those two dots to indicate a very, very abrupt A sound. So long A, ah. Short A, ah. Composite schwa, ah. It's going to be just a brief transition in sound with a decidedly A-class sound to it to help alert you to the presence of some kind of consonant that is a little bit more difficult to hear. The same thing is true with the I-class vowels. In this case, they use the sigol, the short E, the three dots. And so you'll find that in some cases, a composite schwa will be used that has the short E together with the schwa. As a result, you'll hear long E as A, short E, and then the composite schwa as just a very quick transition in sound. And then in the U class category, the O and U vowels, they will use the short O together with the schwa symbol to indicate a transition with consonants that desire more of a U class vowel. So your long O would be pronounced O, your short O, O, and your composite schwa to indicate the absence of a vowel, O. Just make it very short as you transition from consonant to consonant. So that fills out the full paradigm of the vowel sounds: short vowels, long vowels, and when we need no vowel sound, they will use the schwa symbol to indicate the absence of a vowel in any particular letter. As I said a moment ago, a schwa is a schwa is a schwa. A schwa represents no vowel, regardless of all of the little ways in which it might be pronounced. So whether it's the regular schwa with the two dots, whether it's got a composite schwa with a short A, the short E, or O, that transition is still functioning the same in the sentence. Moreover, there are situations in which even a regular schwa may not be heard at all, or where you may find that you need some kind of transition in sound between one consonant and the next. So we often refer to silent schwa, a vowelless consonant that has no sound with it at all, and vocal schwa, a consonant that has no vowel, where you do hear a transition in sound. The thing to keep in mind is that you shouldn't be memorizing rules so much as just understanding how pronunciation works. For example, if we take the Hebrew word melakim, you have a schwa under the first consonant of this word. That indicates that the mem has no vowel. As you move from mem with no vowel into the lamed that follows, it is impossible to pronounce that without some kind of transition in sound. Mul. Even in its most basic form, mul, you're going to hear a transition in sound. We refer to that as a vocal schwa. It's not a rule to memorize. It is the logical outcome of trying to move from a vowelless consonant into the next syllable, melakim. If the schwa is under the final consonant, you also won't hear it. You expect a final consonant to not usually have a vowel. So in the Hebrew word melech, you see a schwa at the end, and it tells you that this consonant is vowelless. That's no problem. It's easy to pronounce. If you have a schwa in the middle of a word, you need something a little bit more nuanced. We'll discuss this in a little more detail later, and you'll learn to understand it as more than just simply a rule. But for now, understand that after a short vowel, schwa is silent. After a long vowel, schwa is vocal. So in the first example, mamlaka, the vowel under the mem is a short A. It is a short, vulnerable vowel. The next consonant has a schwa, and after a short vowel, the schwa will be silent so that the consonant can protect that vowel, if you think of it in those terms. So you pronounce that word mamlaka. After a short vowel, schwa is silent. In the second example, ye laku, the first vowel is long. It's a strong vowel. It doesn't need the support of the next consonant. So, after a long vowel, the schwa will be vocal. It's going to transition you forward into the rest of the word. Ye laku. So, at the beginning of a word, you're going to logically hear a schwa. The end of a word, you won't hear a schwa. In the middle, after a short vowel, schwa is silent. After a long vowel, schwa is vocal. You'll also find, however, that schwa is sometimes doubled. You'll have two consonants with schwa back to back. Now, again, let me use the English word little. L-I-T-T-L-E. And you don't hear the final E. It's like you have two schwas in the middle of that word, lit-tul. When you have two schwas in a row, you are going to have certain expectations about how you pronounce them. First of all, two schwas at the front of a word. Can't have that. It is impossible to have a vowelless consonant, a second vowelless consonant, and a third consonant before you ever hit a vowel and pronounce it. You cannot have a cluster of consonants that long. So two schwas at the beginning of a word is completely impossible. We don't need a rule, it's logic. At the end of a word, two vowelless consonants is going to be pronounced just like we would in English. Malt. Malt would, in English, have an L that is vowelless and a T that is vowelless. We have no problem pronouncing two vowelless consonants at the end of a word. And the same is true in this example here. Katalt. It's easy to pronounce. We don't need a rule. We understand it in principle. And if you have two vowelless consonants in the middle of a word, you pronounce it in the same way that we do in English, like the example little. The first schwa will be silent, the second will be vocal. As you wrap up your first syllable and then continue on with the rest of the word. So in this particular example, you can see mam lakot. The first schwa closes the syllable, the second opens the syllable. Before we can actually let you use these vowels in the pronunciation of words, we need to add in a few other comments. In the last lesson, when we were talking about the Hebrew alphabet, we mentioned to you the begad kafat letters, those letters that sometimes take a dot in them to indicate the difference between a hard and a soft pronunciation. The dot inside of Hebrew letters is actually used in a variety of different contexts, and the begad kafat dot, or the begad kafat letters, is simply one of them. The first type of dot, called a dagesh in Hebrew, is what we call the dagesh lene. Lene means soft. It's the weaker of the two kinds of dagesh. Dagesh lene, or the begad kafat dot, is used to indicate the hard pronunciation of the begad kafat letters. In the examples you see here we have the word midbar. The second letter in midbar is a begad kafat letter, but it follows a vowel. Because it follows a vowel, there is airflow moving into the dalet, and it cannot be hard because air softens it. But we pronounce this word midbar. And the second syllable with the bait begins with a hard plosive action. There is a dot in the bait because a begad kafat letter indicates the hard explosive pronunciation, and it always follows a schwa. That's the characteristic of the begad kafat dot, or the dagesh lene. It always follows a schwa. You can see this in the second example as well. Mishpate. The pe has a dot because it follows a schwa. There is no more sound as you begin to pronounce that particular letter. Mishpate. And it explodes forward as you move into the rest of the word. Dagesh lene, or the begad kafat dot, never follows a vowel. The second type of dagesh always follows a vowel. Dagesh forte, strong dagesh, hard dagesh. This is what we might call the doubling dot. So we have the begad kafat dot for hard and soft pronunciation. The doubling dot indicates two consonants. So in your first example, we have the word chite. The tet has a dagesh forte. It has a doubling dot. And as you can see with the equal sign and the way that the word is spelled out, again, with two tets side by side, you're going to be pronouncing that letter twice, chite, because the letter is doubled. In the second example, we have the same thing, yisadu. In this case, the samic is doubled, and as you can see in each of these examples, a doubling dot, a dagesh forte, always follows a vowel, which makes sense. Because if it follows a vowel, it doubles because it's going to wrap up the first syllable and start you into a new one. So you have to be able to double those letters. As we talk about the doubling dot, it is important to remind you again of the last lesson. Remember that when we were talking about gutturals, we said that gutturals prefer A-class vowels and gutturals do not double. You will find that the gutturals, aleph, ayin, he, chet, and resh, don't double. They will not take a dagesh forte. They will not take a doubling dot. There's also another category of letters that can drop doubling. And this is going to be just an introduction. We're going to return to this later on when it becomes more germane to the discussion itself. But you need an introduction here to the letters skinum levi. Skinum levi is a mnemonic device to remind you that S sounds, S in skinum, S sounds, and the letters Kof, Nun, Mem, Lamed, Vav, Yod, Skinum Levi, are the letters that will often drop a dagesh when they are vowelless. So when they have a schwa beneath them, they will sometimes lose the doubling dot. We will return to that later. It's not going to be a central part of your exercises for this lesson, but it is important to log that in because it becomes a very prominent feature when we get into the formation of words. We've learned about dagesh lene, the begad kafat dot, and we've learned about dagesh forte, the doubling dot. The dagesh lene, the begad kafat dot, is limited to 6 consonants. It never follows a vowel. You will always be able to tell a Dagesh Lene because it's only in those 6 letters. Dagesh Forte always follows a vowel, and sometimes the Begad Kafat letters will follow a vowel and will be doubled. In addition to gutturals and the Skinnem Levi letters that we just mentioned, it's important to remind you that even Begad Kafat letters can appear in places where they are doubled rather than just simply being marked for hard pronunciation. Fortunately for you, if they have a dot, always pronounce them hard, so you don't have to worry about how you're going to pronounce them in those situations. But always make sure that you're looking at what precedes the letter with the dot in it. If it follows a schwa, it is a Begad Kafat dot. If it follows a vowel, it is a doubling dot. Those distinctions are very important. There's one other kind of dot, and we can refer to this as an H dot. In Hebrew, it's called a mapik. An H dot is used at the end of a word to indicate when the letter he is a consonant rather than a vowel marker. Remember, at the beginning of this lesson, we were talking about the way that vowels were initially indicated in texts, and it was by inserting certain letters, he, vav, and yod, in places where they would mark the presence of a vowel because of their affinity to those sounds. Ah, e, a, o, u. So when you have a he at the end of a word, in most cases, that he is functioning simply as a vowel marker. When it is supposed to function as a consonant, it will have a dot in it. So in this example, you'll notice that we have 2 words. They're spelled basically the same, except for the dot in the final letter. One is malka, the other is malka. Let me try to exaggerate that pronunciation a bit so you can hear it. Malka, malka. Malka, with the consonantal he, changes that word so that it means her king. Whereas malka, which is just a vowel marker, means queen. The pronunciation makes the difference in meaning. So these 3 types of dots become important to add to our collection of features as we think about trying to pronounce Hebrew words. The discussion about vowels brings up an obvious point. If we have a consonantal text that's using he and vav and yod to indicate the presence of a vowel, how do I tell when the letter is functioning as a consonant and when it's functioning as a vowel? How do I differentiate between those 2? When are they consonantal and when are they silent? And in addition to those letters, we also have to add in the letter aleph, which sometimes, because it's silent, loses its consonantal character completely and simply shows up in a word purely so that you know the historic spelling, even though it's not pronounced. So how do we deal with he, vav, yod, aleph? How do we deal with these letters in a word so that we can differentiate when they're pronounced and when they're not? In order to explain this, again, I want you to focus not on rules as much as I want you to focus on the logic. I want you to think about the principles of pronunciation. If you do, this will make plenty of sense and you won't have to resort to just rote memory. Keep in mind that vowel markers always have to have affinity with the vowel that they are paired with. So, for example, in the long O and long U, O and oo, the vav has affinity with those vowels because you can hear the transition in sound that is consistent with that type of consonant. Similarly, after a short E, or after a long E, A, or after a long I, E, you can hear a Y sound that allows a yod to have affinity with those vowels. The letter He has affinity with several of those. It's most commonly seen with ah, the A vowel, ah. But what about pet, or a? I can hear a H sound, or O. In those four cases, the letter He can be said to have affinity with those vowels, and it is legitimate to use the letter He as a vowel marker for those sounds. Now, remember, it's mostly used with the A vowel, but it can be used with those others. That's very important for you to keep in mind, because if you're reading through a word and the vowel does not have affinity with the vav or the yod or the he that follows, it cannot be a vowel marker. It has to be a consonant. So, for example, the first word, Adonai, Lord. This is a title for God. At the end of that word, you hear a long A and a yod, a Y. I. When I say ah, I hear an H sound. That's what has affinity with ah, not yod. So, the A and the yod do not have affinity with one another. The yod is not a vowel marker. I have to hear it. I, Adonai. In the second example, we have the word goy. And again, O has affinity with vav, O, or perhaps with he, O. But it does not have affinity with a yod. The yod cannot be a vowel marker. It has to be pronounced as a consonant. Goy. And in the last example, we see the same thing with the long oo, which has affinity with vav, but does not have affinity with the yod that shows up in this form. So we don't say galu and treat the yod as a vowel marker. It has no affinity with the long u. It has to be pronounced. So this word would be pronounced galui, galui. So we see that vowel markers always have to have affinity with the vowels that they follow. Also, every consonant can only have one set of dots. So, for example, in this word, we have tsadi, short I, a vav with a dot in it, an I, a yod, a tav, an I, and another yod. The question then becomes, how do I pronounce each of these letters? The tsade has a vowel. So when I pronounce it, I have to pronounce the tsadi and the I together. The vav with a dot in it looks like a vowel, but it can't be. Because if it was a vowel, then you would have tsadi plus I plus U plus another I. You can't have three vowels together with one consonant. Tsadi already has a vowel. So the vav has to be consonantal, and it has a dot in it. It is not a begad kafat dot because it is not a begad kafat letter. In fact, we can tell right away that it is a doubling dot, because if the dot does not follow a vowel, it's a begad kafat dot. If the dot follows a vowel, It's a doubling dot. It's not an H dot. It has to be a doubled vav. Then as we look beneath the vav, we have an I vowel. We move to the yod, and if the yod was truly a consonant, it would need to have its own vowel notation, because every consonant in a word has to have its own vowel notation except for the very last consonant in the word. Since the yod has no dots of its own, it is not functioning as a consonant, it is functioning as a vowel marker for the I. The same is true at the end of the word. When we get to the end of the word, the yod does not have to have a vowel notation because it's the last consonant in the word, but the vowel in front of it is a vowel with which the yod has affinity. E. It's not functioning as a consonant, it's functioning only as a vowel marker. So this word is pronounced tsiv, doubled vav, tsiv viti, tsiviti. And every consonant in the word has to have one vowel notation and one vowel notation only. That becomes very important for helping you distinguish pronunciation. So let's look at a few additional examples. The first word, mem, a, yod, I, final mem. The yod in this word could potentially be a vowel marker or it could be a consonant. Does it have affinity with the vowel in front of it? No. Yod does not have affinity with ah. You can tell right away that it has to be a consonant. You also know this because it doesn't stand alone, it actually has its own vowel notations. So this word has to be pronounced mayim. In the second example, sin, I, yod, final mem, we find that the yod does have affinity with the I, E. We also notice that the yod has no vowel notation of its own. It has to be a vowel marker. So I pronounce this word seem. In the third example, we can immediately tell that the yod is not a vowel marker. Although it has affinity with the previous vowel, it has a dot in it. And by virtue of this letter and by virtue of the fact that it follows a vowel, it has to be a doubling dot. This is a consonant. It has its own vowel beneath it. It's going to be doubled and pronounced in this word so that we will say kiyem. I'll hear the yod once at the end of the first syllable, ki, yem, functioning consonantal. And in the last example, goy, we again see an example used earlier where the yod has no affinity with the vowel in front of it. Does it stand alone? Yes, it's at the end of the word where it should stand alone, but because it has no affinity with the preceding vowel, it has to be pronounced goy. With aleph, you'll find the same kind of thing. Aleph has a tendency to become quiet. It has no sound anyway. It loses its function consonantally, and as a result, it shows up in the word only to help you spot spelling. At the end of a word, aleph has no sound. It's obviously going to be quiet there anyway. It's not going to have any consonantal function. In the middle of the word, you tell the same way with aleph that you did with the other letters we just talked about. In this particular form, we have beit, aleph, and tav. Beit has a vowel, the tav has a vowel, the aleph does not. It has no vowel dots. Because it has no vowel pointing, the aleph is only there to help you know the spelling so that you know the correct meaning of the word. It's not only not pronounced, it doesn't function as a consonant. So we pronounce this word as ba, ta. 2 syllables. In the third example, the aleph does have its own vowel pointing. Here it's functioning as a consonant. Now, true, we cannot hear an aleph, but that doesn't negate its identity as a consonant. It is a stop, it is a gap between vowels. So, the first syllable is going to be pronounced ra, the second syllable ah, and the aleph stands between ra, ah, so that I hear 2 different vowels. I do not want to say ra as if there is no consonant in the center of that word. So those are the principles that you need to know for vowels. The process of helping people read the text and eliminating ambiguity first included the insertion of consonants that functioned as vowel markers. But once the consonantal text was frozen, another means was used to further develop the idea of vowels. A full slate of vowel notations and schwa, marking the absence of the vowel, is developed that together with the dots to indicate the hard pronunciation of the Bagad Kafat letters, to indicate doubled consonants, and to indicate consonantal H, the H dot, those notations work together to give you what you need to know for starting to put the vowels and the consonants together to form Hebrew words. And that's what you'll be working on in your exercise.